This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
The BFM Breakfast Grill, connecting you to the top people and ideas. Presented by U Mobile.
On the Breakfast Grill this morning, a man who needs no introduction the world over, Malaysian Prime Minister Tun Dr Mahathir. Thank you for joining us on the grill this morning. Tun, let's start with the laments that the corporate world have with our currency and our share markets. Both are displaying great signs of weaknesses. What is the Pakatan Harapan government doing about it?
Well, what Pakatan Harapan can do is constrained by what we inherit from the previous government. And what we inherit is a huge debt and undermining the administrative machinery. We have to attend to that first. Yes, we can have a policy or a target vision of what we want to do. But that is constrained by lack of funds, and they were trying to get the machinery of government to again function well. So our main objective is to recover from the effects of the previous government's huge borrowings and not running the country according to the rule of law. That we have to overcome. Then, of course, if we recover, then we can have a proper vision as to what we want to do for the country.
Well, you used the word if. Presumably you mean the word when. The Ministry of Finance has talked about the debt levels being at about R1 trillion, and the market is wondering how does Malaysia grow itself out of that R1 trillion in debts?
Well, in the first place, we're trying to cover the money that has been lost. Some of the money has been confiscated by Singapore government, by the American government. We expect to recover that money because we have a right to that money. We can show our right to that money because the money comes from Malaysia, 1MDB in particular. And secondly, of course, we need to look into raising funds through selling assets. There are some government assets which we can dispose of and raise money. Beyond that, of course, we are using some of our revenue to pay the debts and to service the loans.
The most immediate asset sales which would move the needle to reduce the R1 trillion of debt, which ones would they be?
ECRL, for example. Now, ECRL, the contract price was about 55 to 60 billion. Now, we just cannot go on. In fact, we would like to drop the whole project if we can. But if you drop the project, you have to compensate. And the compensation is very big because the previous government had already committed themselves to an agreement which placed us in a very difficult position. So what we have done is to renegotiate. And we have done this, we have reduced the scope, we have saved something like 20 billion ringgit. So that's quite a substantial sum, although compared to the 1 trillion ringgit that has been borrowed, that is quite small.
The reduction in cost for ECRL is about 20 billion ringgit, as you say, Tun. Which other asset sales might move the needle?
We are postponing the implementation of the high-speed train for 2 years. That will be less of a strain on our resources. We have also cancelled several other projects which we find are not immediately necessary.
Do the asset sales, as you envisage, include existing assets within for example, the GLC framework or other existing Malaysian assets, which might have been deemed in the past of Malaysian national interest?
In terms of asset sale, we have some property which we are not in need of at the moment, and they can fetch good prices. We'll sell them for whatever value that they may have. Normally, the amount is not very big, but still, the accumulated amount will be quite big.
Would these be properties in the Iskandar region in South Johor, for example, or in Penang of the reclaimed islands, for example? What details?
I don't think so, because the property in Johor has already been sold and the money has been paid, not to us. And it's paid to the person who sold the land. So that is not what we are looking for. And there are certain commitments which we have willingly we have to accept by a commitment made by the owner. But beyond that, we have certain assets. For example, we have some properties, some land, which we may not want to use. There may be certain projects which require land, and perhaps we can raise some funds from that.
Is it possible to provide some details behind that, Tun?
Well, at the moment I cannot, because we are in the process of negotiating, and we have to find a good price for our. We have properties, for example, in Hong Kong. We have properties in Singapore. We have properties in other countries also.
Okay, so not within the Malaysian territory.
Not only we are at home.
Yesterday, Dato Sri Azmin Ali's Ministry of Economic Affairs shared their roadmap for what they call the Shared Prosperity Vision, a 10-year roadmap between 2021 to 2030, envisaging a decent standard of living for all Malaysians. What are some of those details behind that plan?
Well, we notice that the distribution of wealth in this country is not even, and also not even fair. For example, between urban and rural, there is a great disparity. We need to make corrections on that. Between state and state, some states are very rich, some states are very poor. That also we have to make correction. We have a problem with performance of some ethnic groups. For example, the Bumiputera, including the Bumiputera in Sabah, Sarawak. They are rather poor by comparison to the people of other races living elsewhere. All these things have been looked at, and we feel that we need to redistribute wealth in a fair way, because if there is great disparity, then there will be antagonism, and that antagonism may increase over time to the point where it may break out into some violence.
Does the social contract remain a key part of your wealth redistribution agenda, Tun?
Yes, it is a part of it.
Do you reimagine that, those parameters being redrawn?
Not fully. If we have the parameters that is unachievable, we need to rethink, because it is quite obvious there are certain things which we have found out now that we are in the government, that what we had thought when we were in the opposition would be good for the government. We find that there are certain things which cannot be done with a high cost for the government.
In your opinion, what can be achieved with a social contract and what could not be achieved with a social contract?
Well, the disparity sometimes is very big, and that's not easy. There is a divide between town and country, but that is made worse because town is people by different people from those in the country. To correct that means we have to move people from the country into the town. But if we move people from the town into the country will just, the people living in the country will just suffer more.
So what can be done, in your opinion, to really, wealth redistribution is a very difficult agenda. It's a problem the world over. What's the Malaysian solution?
Affirmative action is one of the things we have tried. It was not a total failure. Quite a number of people benefited from that. But when you give opportunities to people who are unable to manage, they fail. If it is because they don't have the opportunity or the capital, we can make correction But the ability of the people concerned is not the same. Some of them, their culture-wise, they are really not suitable for going into business, for example.
So how do you solve that problem?
Train them.
How?
Well, we know where their weaknesses are. We have to bring them in. We have to train them in management so that they will not make too many mistakes.
So in your opinion, it's an educational issue, not a cultural issue or even a...
Yeah, it is an educational issue, it is a cultural issue, it is an educational issue because in the school we don't train people how to manage things. Now we have to focus on financing and management and things like that so that when they graduate or they leave school, they will know something about how to do business. The other thing is cultural. Cultural refers to value system. If your value system is not suitable for certain kind of activity, you are going to fail. For example, if you are laid back, obviously you are not going to be as successful as activists, people who want to do work, who are keen to work hard.
Do you think much has changed in the culture of the Malay population since your book, The Malay Dilemma, in the early 70s?
Much I will not say, but a little change has taken place.
Over the next 2 years, a lot of market observers suggest that there could be a recession on the horizon. Do you fear it might affect Malaysia?
This country, if well managed, can escape recession. We have been attacked before, very severe attacks. We have come out of it without going into recession. So we feel that we have with us people who are very conscious about this thing, who knows some way of avoiding very big decline in the economy.
Tun, you've used quite a lot of ifs and maybes in the last 10 minutes. You suggest that maybe there's many dependencies on the outcomes that you suggest. Is Malaysia well managed at this point in time to overcome these potential difficulties?
Yeah, but when you are trying to do something that will have an effect in the future, you can make assumptions. But when you make assumptions, these are assumptions. It may not happen. So the word if has got to be used to balance it, to cushion it. Otherwise, we are so certain that we can do this thing, and then we find that certain other circumstances prevent us from doing. So when predicting the future, I would suggest that people use the word if.
Yes, absolutely. But are there one or two things, even at the very most basic minimum, that can allow Malaysia to overcome these external challenges?
Yeah, I think Malaysia has had a history of being able to tackle external changes, make adjustments, and find our own way out of this crisis that occurs.
I've been talking to Malaysian Prime Minister Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad. We'll be back after these messages.
You are listening to the BFM Breakfast Grill, brought to you by U Mobile.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us on the Breakfast Grill this morning. I have Malaysian Prime Minister Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad with us. Okay, so you've mentioned quite a few success stories in the last 1.5 years since coming to power, but nonetheless, weaknesses exist. I think most notably when management of the country is concerned, it's the succession plan. And many people lament the lack of a concrete timetable for handover to Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim. How do you comment?
Let me go into what did not happen. In most instances, when there is a change of government, there will be riots and strikes and things like that which would undermine the government. That did not happen. The change was smooth. And since this is a government of 5 different parties, that it could stay together this length of time is an achievement. Not many countries have managed. Even with a coalition of 2 parties, they cannot manage. But here we have 5 parties, And to get 5 parties to agree to anything requires some patience and time. But we have survived. Until this moment, there has been no very strong tendency towards a breakup. Yes, there are some people at the fringes who are not satisfied and they voice their thoughts, but that is okay. That is democracy. But the main thing is this government has succeeded in staying together, in tackling many issues together, in trying to solve the financial problem, as well as having to work with government machinery that we, as the opposition, had before not been very friendly towards. Now we have to work with them, and they may find they do find difficulty adjusting to a new set of people whom they did not like in the past, and elected leaders, the ministers, to also find difficulty trying to work with people who were critical of them before.
One of the areas of weakness, as suggested by business people, has been the lack of reform in the education sector. Do you agree?
Education sector, yes. With regard to education, we need to make rather radical changes. One of the things that we notice is that because of the growth in the number of students and teachers, the quality is not uniform. Certain schools do well, certain schools do not do well. Maybe it's because the quality of the teachers differ. What we are trying to do now is to have the best teacher record the lessons, and the other teachers use the lessons prepared by the best teacher. We can do this, and we can use project it on the screen, and we will learn like language, these courses in language which are prepared by some language specialists. They know how to teach, and we will have to adopt them.
Do you feel the education minister needs to be replaced, in your opinion, Tun Mahathir?
No.
Do you think there's a cabinet reshuffle is necessary at all within the next tenure of your prime ministership?
Not during my time.
Some people say there's been a variance in quality between ministers within your cabinet.
I change a minister and take in a new minister. The candidates that I have are all new. Now this present minister has got 1 year experience. I take in a new minister, I will have a task trying to get him to adjust to a new kind of job. And probably he will not deliver also. A new minister doesn't mean a better minister. As we found out, a new prime minister also doesn't mean it will be a good prime minister.
Many people were excited when they heard that you might be the next education minister, but that didn't happen.
That didn't happen because we promised that the prime minister should not hold any other portfolio.
So that certainty you have told us in terms of there being no cabinet reshuffle doesn't exist where the succession plan from you to the next prime minister is concerned.
Yeah, well, the next prime minister might, of course, have his own cabinet, makes reshuffle. When you reshuffle a cabinet, you create a lot of problems. It doesn't solve many problems. It may create more problems. That is why I'm not very keen on solving my problem by changing people. I have changed people before. You know, I stepped down and then I was called to come back, asked to come back.
You suggested that it would be a 2-year timetable for you to be an interim prime minister. We are several months away from that deadline.
Yeah, I promise I will be an interim prime minister. I will do so. I'll keep my promise.
But the cards are very close to your chest, and they remain close to your chest.
Yeah, because I have to make sure that I solve most of the major problems before I hand over. So when you fix a fixed period becomes very difficult for me to work.
There are many problems facing us both internally and externally, Tun. What are the top two things which are most concerning to you right now?
Well, the people are expecting too much of us. And see, when we take over, yes, we promise to do certain things. But once you take over, then you find what is inside there is worse than what we had expected. Borrowing, for example, the amount of borrowing was horrendous. And then there were promises that we made which is not easily implementable because we are short of money. For example, the toll roads. We promised to abolish the tolls. But you abolish the toll, we get no money from the roads. We have to maintain the road. That costs a lot of money. It's not a small job, it's a big job. It will cost us billions of dollars every year. But we don't have that money. If we have the money, that's fine. But we don't have the money. In order to abolish toll roads, for example, we have to buy the toll roads. We cannot tell a private owner of a toll road, say, please don't collect tolls. Well, that is against the contract they have entered into.
Are we then to assume that the government takeover of the 4 highways is now no longer on the table?
We are going to take over, but we are trying to find a way to take over, maybe gradually, or maybe we might find some other ways where the government doesn't have to fork out billions of dollars in order to take over a whole lot of toll roads, which would cost us something like almost 100 billion ringgit.
You suggested that debt was your major concern at this point in time. Is there a target reduction of that 1 trillion ringgit of debt before you hand over, Tun?
We feel that, the reduction is being done now. It is lower. Partly the reduction is compared to the growth of the country. When the GDP grows, then the percentage of loan goes down. We have a ceiling of 55% of the GDP for loans. But if the GDP grows, then that 55% would be, if we had achieved already 80% of the GDP, it will shrink because of the bigger size of the GDP.
So the emphasis is on expanding the economy rather than reducing the debt.
We are reducing the debt and expanding the economy.
Does the Penang Transport Master Plan come into the picture where expanding the economy is concerned, which is also majority managed by Gamuda, which is the concessionaire behind the highway takeovers?
No, if it is managed by the private sector, the borrowings is by them. It doesn't affect the government. But when the government takes over, it has to pay money. It doesn't belong to the government. It's privately owned. We want to abolish a toll, for example. We have to buy the toll route first. And that costs a lot of money. Plus, it costs us about 30 billion ringgit. And they have still loans which have not been paid. We have to take over the loans. All these things cost money.
Does the Penang Transport Master Plan hinge on the highway takeover, or are they separate and distinct?
They are quite separate because this was ambition by them during the time when they were ruling, they were the government of the country. Penang is quite rich. If you look at the Penang financial situation, it's not as bad as the federal government.
Absolutely. I've been talking to Malaysian Prime Minister Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad. We'll be back after these messages.
You are listening to the BFM Breakfast Grill, brought to you by U Mobile.
On this special extended edition of the Breakfast Grill, I have with us Malaysian Prime Minister Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad. So with regard to expanding the economy, the GLCs used to be a very big component of the economy, but that whole paradigm seems to be changing. In your opinion, how do the GLCs evolve over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, the original idea was that Khazanah should only buy shares which are not taken up by Bumiputera. But now they have invested in a lot of other things, and some of these are not really within their core business. So what is outside the core business, I think Khazanah should dispose of. Of course, Khazanah is partly government-owned. Therefore, we can derive some benefit from their disposal.
So do we assume then that the GLCs, including Khazanah, might take a less prominent role in the economy?
No, they have to stick to the core business. I think if they are buying shares, it's okay. But if they are entering into business deals and all that, that is not what Khazanah is meant to do.
Some people say that the GLCs have been crowding out the private sector, and that's why private investment has gone abroad to cheaper countries.
That is because they don't retain the core business that they were supposed to be involved in when they were formed. Because they shouldn't be buying, they should buy shares that are not taken up.
In your opinion, which assets or which sectors are not core to the Malaysian economy?
Well, there are some investments that they have made which are profitable, but it is not what they are supposed to do.
Does Malaysia Airlines remain part of your plans for the time being?
Well, Malaysia Airlines is one of those investments that they have made. We are still looking into solutions for Malaysia Airlines. It's not been easy. We have done a lot. I mean, the previous government have given them $6 billion, allowed them to sack 6,000 people. But in addition to that, they reduced the number of flights. So if you reduce the personnel and reduce the number of flights, the ratio between personnel and business activity doesn't change.
The example shown by Proton with regard to Geely selling 49% of the Chinese seems to be working, at this point in time. Is that a model that might be adopted by Malaysia Airlines and other GLCs in future?
Well, there is, of course, this idea that some foreign companies might take a big piece of Malaysia Airlines. But that is an idea. We are not against the idea as such. But there are some people who are very sentimental, perhaps. They want to see Malaysia Airlines owned entirely by Malaysians. But there are no Malaysian investors strong enough to take up.
Is there a deadline within your mind and your cabinet for a decision on Malaysia Airlines, Tun?
It's not been easy. As you know, they have done many changes, changes in the management, sacking 6,000 workers, all kinds of things they have done, and yet the losses remain high.
So right now there is no deadline. It's too difficult an issue.
When Malaysia Airlines was formed, there was no low-cost carriers. Now there is low-cost carrier, and this is a factor that is affecting not only Malaysia Airlines, but many other airlines.
The other factor that has been played up in the media, mainstream and offline as well, has been the other 3 Rs, the race, religion, royalty conundrum, Tun, and the presence of Zakir Naik in the country. That's been very divisive for people. What's your approach to him?
Well, he is not a national of this country. He has been given, I think by the previous government, he has been given permanent status. As a permanent resident is not supposed to make any comments on this country's systems or politics. He has breached that, and so now he is not allowed to speak.
Is there a proposition to return him to his home country?
So?
Is there a proposition to return him to India?
Not many countries want him.
And yet Malaysia does.
India has not insisted. I met Mr. Modi, he didn't ask me that he wants back this man. This man could also be troublesome for India.
And yet Malaysia has agreed to take him in.
Not us, he's the previous government.
So how much of a thorn is that an issue for you?
Now we are trying to find some place where he can go to, but at the moment, no one wants to accept him.
And then anecdotally, a lot of there's certain quarters of Malaysia that seem to resonate with his comments, and there are also public statements that are bordering on the sensitive and racially divisive, with very little pushback from the existing government. How do you respond to those issues?
That is a reflection of the racial feelings of the day. You see, racial feelings now is much stronger than before, for whatever reason. And when somebody comes along and says something that resonates with their thinking, even though they don't understand, they like the sound. I'm afraid that when he was speaking in English, and the audience, very big audience, most of them couldn't speak English. But they think that this man is a great fighter and all that, and they like him. Mm-hmm. And we take any action against him, it means that we are going to go against that group. In Malaysia, you have to be very careful about how you deal with this, because it's not a simple one that you find there is a problem here, pick it up and throw it out. That's not the way we do things. You do that kind of thing, you get more trouble.
And there's, of course, a political cost to it, Tun Mahathir.
There is a political cost to it, quite definitely. For example, you look at the other side. With the Chinese, for example, they want Chinese school. And of course, this is not going to bring people together. This is one of the causes why Malaysians don't go to the same school. It's bad. Vernacular school is not what we need in this country. But we also respect the sensitivity of the Chinese. We don't just say, shut it. We have to deal with it in a way that will not hurt the sensitivities of the Chinese. We have made suggestions like putting all the 3 schools on one campus. Even that was rejected by the Chinese educationists. They don't want their children to mix up with other children.
So the lack of traction in the education sector, Tun Mahathir, has been a very big concern for all Malaysians. How do you envisage taking it forward? Because it affects future productivity of the country.
First, the mindsets of the people have to be adjusted. They must learn to understand that this is Malaysia, and Malaysia is different from other countries. And they have to accept that if you want to be together, from the time when you were young, you must have one system of school.
But that's the problem, you see. With Zakir Naik or with Chinese schools in education or racially divisive comments, Malaysia does not have the ability or even perhaps arguably the will to address those issues. You have 3.5 years left, Tun, within this tenure.
Let us look at the negative sides. Not many countries, multiracial countries, is as stable as Malaysia. We have 3 different races, 3 different religions, 3 different languages, 3 different cultures, and also there is an economic disparity between races, and yet this country is stable. That is an achievement, which means that the government has been able to manage. But in other countries, by now, there would have been riots, even civil wars. Just the difference between same religion, Sunnis and Shia among the Muslims, that has brought about the destruction of Syria.
And even within the coalition, as you say, Tun, you've got 5 parties versus the 3 large ones in the past with Barisan. There's been many, as you know, rumors in the country about divisions between the DAP and Bersatu, your own party, and even opposition to your taking on former UMNO members within your party. How do you comment?
This is opposition politics. We find that the Chinese complain that DAP is no longer representing the Chinese. People like Kit Siang is a traitor to the Chinese. On the other hand, the Malays say the DAP is controlling the government. They all are looking from their own angles. But the fact is that we are working together. We have to accommodate each other and see. And sometimes it may appear that DAP's view are prominent, but other views are also being voiced.
And how did you rationalize in your mind, Tun, about taking on former UMNO parliamentarians within Bersatu? Some people could not and still can't accept that.
There are UMNO parliamentarians and UMNO members. We are quite willing to accept the members because they were not involved in the scams, in the stealing of money. But when we find somebody is being charged in court, we are not going to accept those people. And even those leaders whom we have accepted, or members of parliament we accepted, we told them, first, you must resign from UMNO. Then remain as as independents for some period of time. During that time, show whether you are supportive of the government or not. If they are supportive of the government, after a certain period, we accept them. But some we accept immediately because they were not involved in leading the party.
In your opinion, does racial politics still have a role to play in the country?
Racial politics has no role to play if we all forget our origins and believe we are all Malaysians. Then there is no racial politics. But at this moment, we still identify ourselves with our countries of origin.
But some people will say that real unity does not exist in Malaysia because of the official divisions within the races and the uneven privileges.
If you want to be elected, you must take into consideration the feelings of the people. I can be anti-Malay, but it's not going to win me election. And I won't be able to do anything. Can you imagine what will happen in that case?
Speaking of which, in terms of elected people within the government, Tun Zainuddin is a very prominent figure within the corporate sector, but he remains unelected. Do you think he's got too much power?
Well, he does have, he's consulted. People need advisors, people who have certain knowledge. And he is a man who is knowledgeable about business as well as about politics. He's got a long experience, and when we are borrowing money and we are paying debts and all that, his expertise in that area is useful. On the other hand, he has moved around. He has met a lot of people in the country and outside the country, and he would be a good judge of the quality of people we employ.
That's right, because some people say that nothing happens within GLCs within Tun Daim's yes or no, and no appointments are being made without his yes or no.
No, if he has any objection, he must give reasons for it. It's not always that his recommendations are accepted.
Do you still pursue the policy in the past of trusting corporate leaders within your fold? For example, here we are sitting in the Yahya San Al-Bukhari, of course, which is Tan Sri Said Mokhtar Al-Bukhari. Do you still depend on that close connection, Tun?
It's not just Al-Bukhari. There are quite a lot of others who meet me, talk to me, and criticize me. And they are Malays, Chinese, and Indians.
Last question, Tun. The most important question. Your health secrets. Here we are, 94 years old.
Everywhere I go, they ask me that question. One thing is certain. If I get one of those diseases which are fatal, like cancer, for example, I wouldn't live to the 94. Okay? But if you are free from those diseases, I did have a heart attack once, but heart attack today can be treated. But I didn't have those diseases, so I have a chance to live longer. But at the same time, of course, I am very careful about my weight. I don't get fat. I control the food I eat. And I tell people that when the food tastes nice, stop eating. That's not easy to do. But that is my mother's advice. She didn't know anything about medicine. But when I studied medicine, I saw the logic of it. When you eat too much, your stomach gets bigger. And you have to eat much in order to assuage your hunger. And over time, the stomach gets very big. If you eat too much food, you get fat. When you get fat, you give the heart a hard time because it has to pump to more places than before. and soon the heart gives up, and the other organs also give up, and you don't live a long time. By living a long time is one thing. Living a long time and able to function, that is another thing. One of the things that I realize is that if you retire and you don't meet people, you don't talk to people, you don't answer nasty questions from journalists, your brain goes into recession. You can't remember anything, you can't talk, you can't recognize people. The brain, like the muscles of the body, must be exercised.
Tun Dr Mahathir, a huge privilege, probably the biggest honor for us all. Thank you for spending time with us. That was Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, our Prime Minister of Malaysia, BFM 89.9.
Thank you.
The Breakfast Grill is brought to you by U Mobile, Frost & Sullivan's Malaysia mobile service provider of the year.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station. The business station. The business station. The business station. The business station.